Excellent. Hello, everybody, and welcome to what I'm sure will be a fascinating discussion on what is Earth Day. The first Earth Day was back in 1970, and there's been one every year since, but I feel personally that this year there's maybe more momentum and more focus on the planet than in any other year, and we're very honoured and grateful for the fantastic lineup of speakers we've got today to have, I'm sure, what will be a very interesting conversation about what we can do practically in order to look after our planet, because there is only one planet, as we all know, and we all are responsible as people and as corporations and as society to do the best that we can. Just a little bit of admin for you all. We will take Q&A, and if you want to type in as you go, then we'll pick up your questions at the end of each session or at the end of the entire session if they're more general questions. So please type away as you think of things, and we'll collect them as we go. But I'm going to hand over to Matty now, who is CGI's Chief Sustainability Officer, to get things going. Matty, over to you.
Thank you, Tara. What an amazing introduction. It's an honor to be part of this great organization. But Tara, I don't think I'll talk a lot about CGI. I do want to share a little bit about Earth Day and maybe very briefly about CGI's commitment. Every year in April marks the anniversary of a modern environmental movement, a movement we now all call Earth Day. The theme this year is Invest in Our Planet, with a focus on the effects of climate change and efforts to mitigate. As an IT organization founded in 1976, CGI has its own environmental footprint. As well as taking responsibility of our own ecological footprint, CGI's IT solutions and service offerings can help clients manage environmental challenges and provide opportunities for innovation. We have demonstrated our commitment to sustainability in many ways. For example, our commitment to science-based targets and approaches, our implementation of waste management practices, including sustainable procurement, our use of sustainable facilities and continuously striving for greener buildings and infrastructure, and our involvement in research and development. So Tara, I just want to thank you once again for your commitment to sustainability, an area where many CEOs have struggled to invest. Without wasting any further time, I am very excited to introduce the panelists. And I won't introduce the panelists, but they'll introduce themselves. We'll start off with Richard. If I could invite you to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you. And good morning to everybody. My name is Richard Wilson. I'm the Inbound Logistics Director for Arla Foods in the UK. I've been with the business around about 24 years and I have the privilege of heading up UK logistics sustainability ambitions and plans. My organisation, so for those who don't know who Arla Foods are, is an international dairy cooperative. We have 2,100 farmers in the UK. We're very focused on sustainability. Our Future 26 strategy that we've recently launched, sustainability is a really strong part of our strategy, down to sort of colleague levels. Very much focusing on, we drove the climate check project with our farmers. So all of our farmers now provide a data-driven report on their climate performance, and we help them to share and develop best practice. We've also signed up as a business as well globally to the Paris 1.5 degree commitment as well. So we're really supportive and strongly behind our ambitions for an improved, more sustainable planet. Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Simon, if I may invite you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about why Earth Day matters to you.
Yeah, sure. Simon Shaw. I'm a relative neophyte in this realm. I have just started. Well, I started in November as the head of sustainability, sustainable technology partnerships for N2S. N2S is a company in an area of work that is sort of generically known as an ITAD, which means an IT asset disposal company. I don't like the term because disposal sort of brings about thoughts of throwing away. We don't throw away anything at N2S. We try to recycle everything that we take in. So IT asset disposal is essentially taking IT assets from companies, mostly heavily IT dependent companies, and at their end of their life cycle, we dispose of them in the most environmentally friendly way. If we haven't refurbished and resold them, which is clearly the best way to deal with that equipment, give them a new life. As I say, I'm relatively new to all this, so to be on a panel of experts is a term that I wouldn't be comfortable with necessarily, but I'm sure a few of my teachers would be very proud to see me on a panel like this. But having spent 25 years playing rugby, this is an entirely new world for me. But I'm very, very enthused and excited about being part of this.
Thank you, Simon, and you sound like a pro. I'm looking forward to learning more from you throughout the discussion. Sebastian, may I invite you to introduce yourself, please?
You're on mute, Sebastian.
Yeah, somebody had to do it. So thank you, Matty, and thank you to the organizer to invite me. So my name is Sebastian Fenode. I'm a professor in bioinnovation at Coventry University, which is a large university in the UK. It's a large modern university for me in a sense that we try to really develop new novel methods to transfer those methods to industry so there's an impact, so that we actually make a difference. We help the world to get better and to make a difference in society. And this is very relevant to this talk today, because my interest in the Earth Day is a personal interest and a professional interest. A personal interest, like everybody, I'm going to say, well, I want a better world. Who doesn't? But the point is that what we're really trying to do is to develop in depth some novel methods that we can then transfer to industry to really, really make a difference and try to understand how these methods can actually be applied. So this is an important thing. And I know within Coventry, which has several research institutes in addition to the faculties, we try to not only to develop method to transfer to industry, but also taking part into education, where students start to learn really, really early how sustainability has to be part of whatever activity they'll have later on. So I think this is where things have to be developed, but also transferred to be applied into industry.
Thank you, Sebastian. And lastly, but not the least, Jo, do you mind just introducing yourself to everybody?
Thank you, Matty, and good morning, everyone. And thanks also for having me on this panel. I'm really honoured to be here today on Earth Day. So yes, I'm Jo Ruxton. I'm the founder of Ocean Generation, which started off 13 years ago as Plastic Oceans, and it was formed because I'm an ex-BBC producer and I make underwater wildlife documentaries, and I was fed up with us always showing the ocean as if it was full of life and full of fish, and that everything was clean and functioning, and that's not what we were seeing on location. So I left the BBC to make my own film and made a film called A Plastic Ocean. During that time, I was learning so much, not just about the subject itself, but also what it's like when you don't have the support of the BBC to make your films and trying to fundraise and everything. But in the last 13 years, there's been a lot more in the press and in people's minds about the problems that plastic is causing to the environment. So at Ocean Generation, we've now opened up to look at other ocean issues, and we're creating a movement, an inclusive movement to tackle these ocean threats. And we're doing that through science and storytelling. So it's a massive awareness and education movement to bring the ocean into the classroom and to make people understand the ocean is our life support system. And so many of us grow up thinking that our oxygen comes from the trees, but actually only 20% does. Half of it comes from the ocean. So every second breath you take is courtesy of the ocean, and it has to remain healthy. So we're putting it back on the map.
Fabulous. Jo, perhaps we could start with yourself then, from a question point of view. You were telling us before the panel kicked off how you'd been swimming in the ocean off Cornwall this morning, which sounds cold but amazing to me. You've obviously had a really interesting and varied career, and you find yourself at this point now with all the experience that you've got. What challenges are you still seeing though, and what might you share a little bit with the group?
As a charity, the challenge is always fundraising, I'm afraid, and particularly after what's been happening in the last 2 years and what's happening now. The environment's kind of moved further back on the priority list, but you know, we haven't stopped doing the work that we're doing. So that's one challenge. The other is, I sometimes feel that we get too much bad news about the environment, really hard-hitting environmental films, and it leaves people feeling hopeless and, you know, what's the point? What difference can I make? And that to me is a challenge, because I see so many reasons for hope. I've seen so much change. You know, here we are now all talking together. Look at this group of people celebrating Earth Day. But I feel that we've got to bring the hope back, because if everybody thinks all the time about the problem with climate change, ocean acidification, rising sea levels, pollution, all of these, what do? You don't want to think about it. But actually what we're trying to do is get everybody to do something, because a whole load of people doing one little thing is going to be much more effective than 1 or 2 people going completely carbon-free, plastic-free, vegan, all of these different things. It's actually much more effective if we all do something, even if it's something like, I've come on with wet hair today. Have a day when you don't use a hairdryer, just little things like that you can contribute to making the world a safer place for the future of the generations to come.
Yeah, I think that's really, really nice. I mean, is there a positive, good news story that you can share about the oceans, based on what you're saying, that we all hear the bad stuff all the time? You're absolutely right. Documentaries are so depressing, aren't they? You know, is there sort of a positive thing you'd like to share?
Well, absolutely. I think we need to get away from sensationalism. There was a film that came out called Seaspiracy, and it did a lot of good for showing people the problems of factory fishing and bottom trawling, and you know where we are with overfishing. But it also said that marine protected areas do nothing. Well, I was actually involved in setting up the first marine protected areas in Hong Kong. I lived there for 14 years and was working with WWF, and worked within the government as well to get this legislation through to protect those areas. I go back there now and the difference is phenomenal, but also there's amazing success stories around our shores here. The Lyme Regis reserve that was started through the work of the Blue Marine Foundation. It is phenomenal what's happening there, and that now is going to be replicated in Turkey, and I think France and Spain as well, because it's working with the fishermen to see how it's going to work best to protect their future as well. You know, I see the fishermen as an endangered species as much as the fish that they're catching. So it's about understanding how these things function, how leaving the ocean alone can bring it back. Look what happened during COVID. There was nothing but positive stories about what was happening because the human beings were locked down. And you know, obviously it was a tragedy for so many people, but actually the environment and certainly the ocean has shown incredible signs of recovery in a very short time. So we need to understand there is hope, and that's what we're working with.
That's really good. We do a little bit of work ourselves with Project Seagrass, who are amazing people. We've worked out that we could give them money, as you say. You know, donations are important, but we also worked out that we could give them technology. So we're helping them track the seagrass fields around the coast of Britain using satellite tech. And the good news is that they're getting bigger, the fields. So
that is so good to hear. These zones, the salt marshes, the seagrass meadows, the mangroves, the areas that people think of swamps that they want to clear and develop, you know, for their ocean properties and all of this, they are so important, and so important for fixing carbon as well. I mean, one mangrove tree will sequester about 4 times as much carbon as a terrestrial tree, and yet mangroves are being cleared all over the world. That coastal zone is really important, and that's something else that we're bringing back through our education, so that people understand how the ocean functions and how you know we need it to be healthy. But it's great to hear your work on seagrasses. That's maybe I can bring that into my next film.
Maybe, yes, maybe. So thanks for that, Jo. I feel a bit more positive about everything, so thanks for that.
There's lots
to cheer me up.
Good.
Maybe following that theme, I'm going to move on to Richard now. I'm a huge consumer of Arla food, actually, being vegetarian and you guys having such fantastic food available. But I haven't really thought about the processes involved. And as you were speaking, I was thinking to myself, gosh, you've probably got quite a big supply chain there, and you're probably working with a lot of farmers and distributors, etc. Do you think you could just give us a little bit of an overview of what's involved? I mean, maybe take the processes involved in getting milk to the table for our teas and coffees, for example. Could you give us a little bit of an overview, Richard?
Of course, Tara. Yeah, no problem at all. And great to hear that you're a
big customer of ours,
yes. and love our products. Yep. I also have a fridge full of our products. They really are. They are really very good products.
Cheaper than me.
No, actually, I think I just get them out the supermarket, but that's fine. I'm happy to pay because they're good quality products. But to answer your question, then, so yeah, we work in the UK. We are a cooperative. We're owned by farmers. There are 2,100 in the UK. I mentioned already previously about the climate check, so that is something that was industry leading from a global perspective, getting our farmers on board. Joe talked very much about it's really about getting everybody on board, and this is a programme that we've developed with our farmers really to start to drive efficiency from a climate perspective, which also translates into good business sense as well for our farmer owners. So we start with the milk that is produced by our farmers. We then have a supply chain, as you rightly say. So I head up the inbound logistics operation, which is the collection of the milk and the delivery into our factories. So we then deliver into our factories. We've got a number of factories around the country, so we make a number of different products. So, but obviously milk is one of those. So we're one of the biggest manufacturers of milk products in the UK into the marketplace. So we have a number of very highly efficient factories. I was in one of our factories yesterday, and they are putting a major investment in about very much how can we work more sustainably from a packaging perspective, and really sort of driving down the use of damaging plastics into more sustainable products. So major investment being done there. Obviously, the team there are really committed to driving this forward. We then take the products into our distribution centres and deliver then using our transport operations into our customers. Major retailers, food service, a number of different organisations that we deliver. So multiple deliveries on a daily basis. So a really huge operation. And I think I'll come probably later in the conversation to talk a little bit how we work with our partners in our logistics arena to really sort of look towards engagement. How do we get people engaged? Very much in terms of driving more people really getting involved in some great work on sustainability, playing their part, even if that's small. I mean, we've got some colleagues in our warehousing operations who really focused on recycling some of the packaging that they've got in the warehousing operation. Our colleagues care. People watch the films that Joe's talked about, and our colleagues care, and we're really very much as a business focused with the 1.5 degree commitment to really play our part, actively play our part, and all our colleagues are getting involved in doing that.
That's brilliant. What do you think the direction of travel will be for packaging around milk in particular? You know, we all have those cartons of plastic in our fridges, but would love not to. Do you think we're going to go back to milk bottles and glass?
Yeah, I mean, there are different schools of thought in terms of the overall recyclability of a glass milk bottle, because the concept is fantastic. Having been around some of the factories sort of 30 years ago, they were highly underinvested and not particularly hygienic. The plastic milk bottle actually is a really small amount of plastic when it comes in its form, and it's really about how can we. It's a really sustainable piece of packaging, but it's about how can we increase the recyclable content within that to really make it sustainable. So I mean, if my prediction is that we will move to more sustainable plastic bottles, but who knows? Cartons could be. I mean, we have had cartons in the past. When I first started, there was a mix of glass, plastic, and cartons. And Yeah, I think all of the materials that are used, all of them, whether it's glass, whether it's plastic, whether it's cartons, it'll be very much a strong focus on making sure that all of those products that are used are heavily recyclable. I think that's going to be the main focus, but it'd be difficult to predict whether it would be plastic, carton, or glass bridge, or maybe a combination of all.
No, I understand. And just one tiny question for me on all those farmers. Fantastic. How do you link them all up? Do you use technology with them to keep them all connected?
Yeah, we've got the climate check system, which is actually an online system, and then we have a network of our farmers meet either physically or virtually in district meetings, regional meetings, area forums on a fairly regular basis, and we connect them through working parties. And when we mentioned about we have a number of different elements within our sort of climate check process, which highlights real best practice. And what we try to do is we try to connect the ones with real best practice with the ones who are maybe not quite as good at this moment in time, so they can learn from each other. So farmer talking to farmer, so it's really credible. And we've seen some really good improvements in this area already. So really, the virtual world through COVID has demonstrated it can be done. And quite efficiently, but clearly, if there are some real opportunities there and potentially some substantial investments, then farmer to farmer potential physical connection is also something that obviously would happen.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Richard. Sebastian, over to yourself now. I think both Joe and Richard have kind of introduced, without saying it, the concept of the circular economy, which, to be honest, if I had to do an exam question on it, I wouldn't get past 20 words, I don't think. So maybe you could perhaps help us as lay people and to understand what that term means, because you hear it bandied around a lot, but I'm not really sure people are that clear on what it's all about. So perhaps you could help us.
Thank you, Tara. I'll try, but I think this is the most important point. It's the concept and what it means to people and how people translate that into. So circular economy is great. It's the idea that in a linear economy, you create some product, you consume them, you throw them away. In a circular economy, you avoid to do that. So you do the same thing, but that so-called waste is then recycled back into the economy. And that looks great. The problem is what it means to people and how it's done. So recycle, what does it mean recycling, how and where? That's an important thing. Also, in this example and what we've talked about so far, there's a very important point, which is it's about avoiding having waste, so saving the environment. But I think for all the stakeholders to be able to take part into that, and partly the industry, which is where the finance is, there's also a need for that waste to have some added value to it. And this is an important point. So to illustrate that, I'm going to talk about some of the techniques we've been developing. So the main thing we're working on is what you call a bioremediation, where you use life or microorganism of plant and so on to actually recycle, to get rid of metabolize, or to reuse all this waste in a nutshell. So particularly in our case, we use bioleaching, which is not new, which is a method which has been used in the mining industry to recover precious metal from mining. Now, recently, we've been applying the method to try to recycle, but I'm going to say recover, precious metal from other waste, and particularly what we call electronic waste. Another word I hate, because I want it to be called e-source and not e-waste. This is an important point. For most of people, when we start talking waste, we start talking of something, by definition, which is a waste, which is not something we want to reuse. Who want to wear waste? Who want to eat waste? And this is important because we're talking about, it's not about setting up a new method for people to fit in, it's about understanding it. So in our technology, it's fantastic. We've got all it, let's call it steady waste for the sake of it, all these old computers and so forth, and which is to produce up to 50 million tons a year. So we're talking a lot of material. This material could end up somewhere in the world as a pile of waste. Now, in order to avoid that, we recycle it, recover it, but also what is important in this case, and which make it a bit easier than the plastic in the ocean, for example, is that there's a massive, massive value. If you think that up to 7% of the world gold is in electronics, clearly, straight away, everybody understands this is this has got value. So now we're getting industry interested in it. The key is that it's not just about industry. It's about also what people do. And we go back to the consumer now. Quite often we got people getting a coffee cup somewhere where the cup is recyclable. For people, what it means is that cup, great, I'm going to put it in my orange or whatever the bean color is. That's it. I've recycled it. But in most of cases, people don't really know what's happened next. And the key is that it's quite important to know what is the mechanism that goes with it, what is the method which is used, which is where I'm coming into. So the recycling of the metal we do is there to try to replace slowly the method which I use for now. So far, the method used all over the world to recycle metal are going to be based on strong acids in hydrometallurgy or in pyrometallurgy in strong heat. And the key is that, yes, those metals might be recovered with some of them and non-specifically, but at what cost? The strong acids get down to the environment, the strong energy and heat will have a massive carbon footprint. So the problem is that we're recycling it, but how? So here, defining the method things get recycled or recovered is really, really fundamental. The key is that the other point which is important is that I was looking for the other day for presentation. I was looking for a nice picture on Google to represent the circular economy. And if you Google circular economy picture, you'll have a lot of round thing like this where you start here, it finishes there. And this is not circular. This is just a bent linear economy where those two things here don't actually meet. So the key is that exactly what you said. Somebody's got to buy a cup of coffee. The cardboard little thing's been built somewhere. It's going down. Somebody put it in the orange bin. That's that guy there. No, the link in between is a really tricky one. How do we create this? In our example, it's a really, really good point. So far, people build computers. And when at the COP26, we were telling them, this is what we do. We use microorganisms to pick up those metals and recover them. Everybody loves it. It sounds Star Trek-y. It sounds fantastic. It's a low temperature. There's no emission of gases, so it's great. The problem is that when those companies want to take part in it, say, how can we help? So, well, it would help if we knew what is in your computer. But that, again, is something which is quite difficult for these people to tell us. The other key is that if we try to apply that to electric vehicle batteries, for example, the problem we have is that when we come to the battery waste, they're all quite similar. So we know which are the metal, we know how to do that, and we tackle it. Now, the key is that when we want to apply this technology to the battery themselves, we got another issue. Each car manufacturer has got a different batteries. All these batteries, they don't need to have the same bolt to dismantle them. So the key is that we're getting to the point, the case of figure is now that we got recyclers, we got manufacturers, and this is still really linear because the recyclers and the manufacturers, they might talk together. Those guys know we can deal with it, but they don't deal with us. What we need are the manufacturers, in fact, the designer of the product being talking to those so-called recyclers. The recyclers don't have to be the hand of the product, whether it's linear, oval, circular, or whatever the shape. These people need to talk together. Then this circularity becomes more than a flat two-dimension cycle. I think it's more sort of one of those screws going on where somehow the recyclers will help the manufacturers to develop new method. The novelty of the technology doesn't have to be in the recycling. It has to be in those guys talking together. The recyclers, I will tell the guy, you know, if you want to build a brand new novel battery, make sure you build it so we can recycle it. And that's the change. Now we can work that all together. This is where it works. We cannot have a circular so-called economy if you do not have the recyclers or the wasters, whatever you want to call it, talking to that. Now, the key is that it's not just industry or manufacturers who are responsible. It's also the consumers, because in the end, the customer is king. They will be the one that will be buying the product from the manufacturers. So if the customers, the users, understand all these elements, the manufacturing, the recycling, and take part in it to understand what it is they need to do, it's a major, major factor. So altogether, this circular economy is not something that people need to watch on TV and adhere to. They need to build it. And it's quite important. When Joe earlier on was talking about those sensational programs on TV where, oh, we need to save the oceans, But when I'm sitting in the UK on my seat watching TV, says this is great. I hope they will do it. But it's up to us to do it. And the key is that people watch the program. At the end of it, they feel sorry about the dying animal, and they just go straight on, put a kettle on, not understanding that by putting this kettle on, you take part into this using a lot of energy, so forth and so on. At a national level, international level, it's massive. Now, I'm not telling people that they can't have a cup of tea. I'm just telling people that in single gesture, Joe was saying drying hair, whatever it is, in a single gesture, they need to understand where this goes. And I think the change will be beyond just not putting a kettle on, but just understanding that it is everybody's job to understand which part of your everyday's life, whether it's buying a new phone or what to do with the 4 phones which are in your drawer that you don't know what to do with. There's a lot of elements we need to understand, and this will link to very, very high-tech innovation or very, very complex manufacturing, and this will actually work together. So I think the way I look at a circular economy is more, who are all those members holding hands? And I'm telling you, they're not holding hands, and that's an important factor.
Speaking as someone with maybe slightly more than 4 phones in her drawer, what would you suggest I did with them all then, from a circular economy point of view, as someone who wants to be an informed consumer? Is there some research or something I should do before or should I just leave them in the drawer?
Are you talking to me or to Simon?
Yeah, no, to yourself. No, maybe both of you in a second. It's a bit of a segue, but from your point of view,
you were doing a fantastic transition, because the key is that.
So, feel like I've got too many phones I need to deal with.
So there are 2 things. First of all, is understanding one has 4 phones in a drawer is hilarious. If you think that all these phones are, first you have to understand that all those elements which are now becoming critical raw element material. So these elements are disappearing. The same way we've got animals disappearing, being extinct, elements are being extinct too. So tomorrow everybody want to buy an electric car, but to this day, these electric batteries are using a lot of cobalt. Now, cobalt is rarer and rarer and disappearing all over the world. And wherever it's extracted is completely unethical. In some country in Africa where 5 years old are in slavery and are dying extracting the metal. So it's really nice people driving an electric car feel like, oh, I'm saving the world. Well, in a way, people have to be responsible to what they do. Now, if they understand that that cobalt might be present in many devices they have, including some electronic device, then the point is, first of all, not to keep it in a drawer. Now, the point is, what do we do with it? The key is to understand, to find, instead of throwing it in the bin, maybe to understand where it should go. And there are some places, there are some companies who do recycle properly this material. And I think I thought the question was Simon, because Simon worked with N2S, who we've been developing this biological method with, in an interesting way, because we always have the idea that universities where they're fancy guy, they're in the lab, they do fantastic stuff, but it remain there. That has changed. Now we develop methods that we need to transfer to these companies. And this is what we've done over the last 4 years with N2S, which for many years were recycling electronics, but understood that when it comes to the end, some of it, we don't know what to do with it. And we need to send them wherever apparently people do a good job. But because they knew they were not, they got in touch with us and we developed those methods so that not only the method we develop on site, so we can keep the material with us, but also avoiding methods which are detrimental to the environment. And I'm sure Simon can follow on that.
Yeah, tell us about it, Simon. Then I've got this drawer full of phones. Let's call it 4, but I might put a 1 in front of it. What do I do with them then, from an N2S point of view?
Well, it's something I literally hear every single day of my life in my current position. I'm there speaking to corporates about their responsibility and what they need to do, and every chief technology officer or chief sustainability officer is asking me what they should do with their own phones. And you're absolutely right. It's a really difficult decision, because the reason you've probably got 4 phones in your drawer and a couple of laptops under your bed is probably, one, because you're worried about the data that exists on them. They don't work anymore. You're not sure that they've got any value, so you don't want to take them into a cash converters, and you're not really sure if cash converters or any of these other institutions are able to deal with the data. So that's one thing. You probably paid a lot of money for them, so you're thinking, well, why isn't there any value left in it? Why should I just, you know, I'm not recommending this. Why should I just throw this away? And it's a really tough decision for all of us. But at the end of the day, that's what we are aiming to provide the solution for. So we currently run IT amnesty programs. So a lot of the companies that I am speaking to on a corporate level, to just, you know, to deal with their IT on a corporate level, a lot of the employees are actually asking for that facility to be able to have bins where they know that an ITAD of repute is dealing with them. So an N2S, for example, are dealing with them, dealing with the data, recovering the metals from them, dealing with them the most sustainable way. They want to know that, so they're encouraging their CTOs, sustainability officers, to provide that service within the offices. On the corporate level, it's actually a trickier proposition, trickier thing to sell. You wouldn't think so, but it is, and the reason for that is that as I alluded to earlier, a lot of these companies that are heavily IT dependent, so banks, insurance companies, legal institutions that have a lot of tech. So generally, each employee will have one iPhone or a phone, probably a desktop, definitely a laptop, maybe even an iPad too. So 3 or 4 devices at least every single employee. So if you look at a large insurance institution that's got, you know, 20, 30,000 employees, that's a lot of hardware, and they've paid for that. So they want an immediate, well, yes, they want the security dealt with, but 2, they want a return on that investment. So often when it comes down to the choice of ITAD, they're still looking for the best commercial return. So the best immediate, you know, money return for those devices. So, you know, ITADs will come along and they'll say, you know, we'll refurb this device, resell it, and we'll give you a return on that for providing us with the service. But they won't be digging down on the sustainability solution that ITAD provides, and that's where we differentiate from all others, or most others. There's some out there that are pretty responsible, but a lot of companies just don't drill down on that piece, and that is really important, not just because it's important for the sustainability of this equipment, but also because from a reputational point of view, the last thing, you know, I'm not going to say any names, but a large insurance institution or bank wants is to hand over some devices. Those devices are, you know, let's say 5% of them are beyond economic repair, and that ITAD says, well, we'll deal with those responsibly, and then they end up in a skip or sent off on in a container to most likely Africa or you know, the Eastern Europe, because that's exactly what happens. You know, the UK is probably, well, it's certainly the second worst in Europe for exporting e-waste. So the likelihood is that there's a lot of equipment that's sitting on, you know, a tip in Middle Africa, being burnt and searched through by kids and ultimately burnt for the few precious metals they'll get out of it. And it's a horrific story, but you know, we continue to not dig down on you know, where our supply chain leads. So we're all looking at the inward bound supply chain and looking at all our suppliers and how sustainable they are, but we're not looking at the other side, you know, where all our waste goes and how sustainable that is. So it's a really important thing, and it requires kind of board level pressure, and I think, you know, the more and more we see sort of heads of sustainability have a voice at boardroom level, the more we'll get to, you know, to accomplish our aims. But the problem being is those you know, it's a relatively new position. I don't envy those sustainability leads in any of these companies, because it's such a a big job, but as everyone's pointed out thus far, if everyone has to do their little bit, and I think the more employees engage and the more employees put pressure on boards to make those changes, the better.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just changing the topic ever so slightly, much like Joe, you've had quite a varied, different career as well yourself. So I'm sure everybody's quite curious to know how you've landed where you are now. What was your driver in picking a sustainability career after a successful career in sport?
Well, look, I've been, I look back, I did a bit of research on Earth Day, looked into what it stood for. I wouldn't say I've been a lifelong kind of environmentalist, let's say, but everything I've done to date, whether it's been my rugby career or anything I've got involved with from a business perspective has had a sustainability element, and I'm very keen to make sure that exists in everything I do. So I think, I interestingly, I saw the tagline for Earth Day 2022, and it said, every day should be Earth Day, and I totally agree with that. I was thinking about cracking a joke about how I often forget my wife's in the Mother's Day conversation. When Mother's Day comes around, I forget a gift, and I say, well, every day's Mother's Day because we appreciate you and we work on and giving you that good feedback, and we love you, and I think if you look at anything in life, whether it's our own health or in mental health, we have to work on it and maintain it and invest in it. And I think it's just the same with everything I've ever been involved with. My rugby career lasted 23 years, and that's because all throughout that, I loved playing rugby and I wanted to sustain it as long as possible. And in order to sustain a rugby career, which is fraught with danger and issues, you have to invest a lot of time and effort in your training program, in your nutrition, in your sleep patterns. It's all about investing back in something that you love to make it the most sustainable it can be. So I use that approach in everything I do and every business entity I'm involved with. So I'm involved in, lots of people will go when I say this, but I'm involved in a restaurant group as an investor called Rare Restaurants, and yes, we're essentially a state group, but we've just won best ESG integration for our restaurant group through our reforestation and biodiversity investment. So as I say, everything I do is aimed at sustainability and prolonging life.
Simon, that's amazing, and it's great to know you're ex-professional rugby player, investor, sustainability, you're doing everything, and it's incredible to learn about it. Tara, I do have a question for you, actually, from a CEO perspective. Sustainability is becoming a really big topic, but would love to get a bit of insight from you from a CEO perspective, whether this is a topic that's becoming important for CEOs, and what sort of trends are you seeing on this front?
Yeah, I would say more so in the last 18 months than in the previous 18 years. So from my point of view, I feel kind of responsible for the 6,000 people that work at CGI in the UK and Australia, and that we're in the technology sector, so our hopes and dreams are, quite forward-looking because of the work we do, but also the type of people who want to work in tech are also not just wanting a wage. They want to work for a company that has purpose and that does the right thing. So it felt natural for me to try and represent that group by doing the right thing from a sort of top-down point of view. I think in other sectors, maybe they're not in the same point on their journeys, but I do sit on quite a few sort of CEO forums, and was lucky enough to be part of Alok Sharma's COP26 business group, and they were CEOs from all industries who had very little in common apart from a genuine commitment to do better and talk about how they could make their little bit of the puzzle work a little bit better. And, you know, we've heard from in business here as well, it's that, you know, we've all got different challenges, whether it's, you know, how we package our milk or whether how we recycle our equipment. I feel that we've all got different things we can do. But I do think that CEOs on the whole, if they're not thinking about it properly, then they will lose out, because people will not want to work for them actually as well. So I think there's a pressure in a different direction that, you know, people will want to work for firms that are looking after the planet, because, you know, we've only got one. And, you know, if you're not on that team, then, you know, people can choose a lot more where they work these days. So I feel it's not just altruism. I think it's good business as well from a CEO point of view. And that's when I do talks, I try and encourage the right behaviour, because it's good for business. You know, doing good is good for business. You know, we can't separate the two. We're all, you know, we exist to make money, but we don't have to make money and cost the planet. You know, I think that's the slight difference that I've seen in the last 18 months or so.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. And we do have a lot of questions, I'm sure, but I have quite a few for the panelists as well. I'll run through all the questions quite quickly. I'm just conscious of time. Richard, just thinking and sticking with the theme of Scope 3 emissions, keen to learn more about what Arla Foods is doing around Scope 3, and with your experience in inbound logistics, where do you see the opportunities, and what are some of the things you're working on?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, scope, we don't just focus on Scope 3. I mean, we set our ambitious target by 2050 to be, as a global organisation, carbon net zero. And on Scope 1 ambitions, Scope 1 and Scope 2, which are your own operations within sort of logistics and operations, we've set ourselves by 2030 a target of reducing our impact by 63%. On Scope 3, our targets are also very challenging, but the way we've done it, because this is where you're dealing with third-party organisations, where it's not your own organisation, it's more challenging in terms of how can you actually implement a strategy which may not necessarily resonate with that particular organisation's strategy. So some of that is about how do we work with our partners, how do we select our partners, and we are very fortunate that we arranged a session just before COVID hit with a number of the owners and senior executives of our third-party organisations that we work with a number of third-party logistics organisations, and we brought them together for a sustainability conference where we shared Arla's ambitions and really asked them to talk about what they were doing. So they could share, obviously, some of the non-commercially sensitive ambitions, and it was a really inspiring session. Where there's quite a lot of best practice sharing between third-party logistics organisations and ourselves. And what we've asked them to do since then, and they've all done, is to create a plan for what they were going to do in terms of this year, but also, really importantly, what their plans are from a sustainability perspective by 2030. So very much about a collaborative sort of approach, asking them to build their own plans that they then commit to, but also when it's non-commercially sensitive, asking them to be prepared to share that with some of our other partners, so we can really move the needle. So very much about encouragement of working with our partners and setting a clear direction, which has been great to see. Some of these guys have actually gone past our ambitions already, which is fantastic to see. Some need a bit more encouragement and guidance, but some have been inspirational. So inspiring them really to sort of go in a direction that makes us all more sustainable.
That's fantastic. And just very quickly, maybe in a minute or so, what role does technology play in your organization? I think you briefly touched on it earlier on. Is there any other areas that you're using technology that you'd want to share?
Yeah, well, certainly from our in-house transport operations, we use a telematics solution, which is how do we monitor the performance of our lorry drivers, and this is when we talk about monitoring performance, we're talking about how they drive the vehicle and how efficiently they drive the vehicle. And we're able through that to see the drivers that are driving the vehicles really efficiently, and also from a compliance perspective that they're sticking to the speed limits, etc. The speed limit's there for a good reason. So it's very much about a focus on safety, but also if the drivers are driving really effectively and efficiently from using the telematics system, we tend to improve our MPGs as well. So it's got a better impact on the environment, and we really encourage our drivers to do that. We give them awards on a monthly driver of the month, that sort of stuff by depot, quarterly awards, and we're moving towards a driver of the year ceremony, which we're planning in September, which will again, it'll focus on encouraging people to have really good, strong, sustainable behaviours in their day job.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Sebastian, it feels like a really good lead into you in terms of giving us some insights on some of the research areas or activities you've been involved in, whether that is from a circularity perspective or scope 3. Just very briefly, would love to learn about what Coventry are involved in.
The interesting things about those scopes is that you got scope 1, 2, 3, and where the material come from, what do we do with it, how do we deal with it for the waste and so on. And you can't deny these are different activities, but by siloing them into those scopes, we tend to separate them from each other, and I think they shouldn't. So to give you the first example with N2S, for example, I knew those guys, well, they've got electronics, well, we've developed some processes. To put it together, it's not really simple because electronics, you've got material from the 70s, very different from the one that were built last year. Then we got hard disk, you got computers, you got monitors, you got a lot of things. And the processes we've developed, although, so we were using bacteria which pick up metal and put in solution. But before that, we need to understand what is it we're starting with, how we're going to process it for those bugs to tackle it, and then what is the end product? What do customers want to buy? Do they want to buy really pure metal, or do they want to buy an oxide? Do they want to buy an alloy? And this is really important for the techniques developed by the researchers to be applicable to the real world. We need to work with all those scopes together and have a company that understands that where the method is going to fit in. So in this case, for example, what we did, we developed proof of concept, and then the whole idea was to transfer the methodology in a company that barely heard about microbiology before, create a lab on site, understanding what we're fitting it with and where it's going to go to. And this is quite important. So we're working with, particularly metal, we work with different industry, different metal now. I was a few weeks ago with the big conference talking about minor metals, which is again working with, we're talking now with a company in the States working with lithium to see exactly how we're going to deal with that. And the key is to understand that where does it come from? Where is it going next? So it's not purely about developing a method and a process. It's about understanding how to implant, to embed that method in the company, in the industry. This is quite important. In fact, the pressure recently that has been put on company to embed sustainability is creating a bit of a panic with companies because they feel like, look, companies, it's simple. It's not like an industry. We innovate all in the academy. We innovate all the time. In industry, if it's not broken, you don't fix it. So it works for many years. Then there's going to be a jump. The sustainability is going to be a jump. How to install sustainability in a company is a bit of a tricky one. So at the COP26 again, we're approached by companies saying that, oh, we love what you do. Can we do it? But to embed that process into an existing industry is really difficult. It may be difficult logistically, but also as an investment point of view. If companies have been doing things forever, and they got billions invested in it, now suddenly you come and say, and that's the issue with innovation, if you tell them, we need to change everything altogether, that's terrifying. That means losing investment, losing jobs, it can't work economically. So it's important that the techniques we develop are actually compatible with the existing industry, and when once embedded in, replace slowly the methods. I work with a huge consortium in Austria. It's a metallurgist consortium working with metal, and they've got this massive investment with loads of stakeholders to try to implant and embed this bioleaching within the existing method to see how in this system, which is not the most sustainable yet, we can slowly mix it together and work on it to develop it. So we're working also with the plastic industry, which I talked, Joe mentioned early on. The problem with the plastic is that because you don't have so much value in a plastic, it's really difficult to bring those technology, to invest in technology, to work on material, to make just the world better. I wish it was the case, but often we cannot, as Tara was saying earlier on, we cannot just ignore the businesses, which are the ones that will implement those methods and develop them. So it's a difficult one, but already we are working with companies that can see that there is a gain into having a better methods into processing the plastic. There's also an added value into that. And finally, another thing that impressed me quite recently, we're contacted by a large housing association, and those guys, they've been not only building building properties to house people, so that they've got a lot of things on their hands. They've got the people providing the material, they've got a waste build, and where this is going to be recycled. But for them, they approaching us, the team come and say, look, we are the sustainability team, as Simon mentioned earlier on, and they said, look, we've got an idea, we'd like to start somewhere, so we'd like to start by recycling the plastic, which in itself is not a bad idea. But I don't think that's the way sustainability would be approached the best. The best thing was, fine, a couple of material, we can work on it, but then again, we're keeping it linear. You can still continue all what you do, however the material provided, whatever the material used, whatever you bring it in, and then we'll recycle the plastic. This is very linear. We still start like this, but the key is going to be for the whole company to step back and to look at how the strategy can be sustainable. So first of all, what are those materials? How are they being provided? By whom? Is that the most sustainable way? Is it the best way to build these houses? Whatever we create, what are they going to be used as in 30 years time? What are the material? And all this is in the building industry, is that we're working to that. But I thought it was a really good example of those thousands of industry who now suddenly feeling the pressure to do sustainability, to apply sustainability, to embed sustainability because it's better, but because I have to. And all this is a bit of an issue, see, where do we start? And I don't think starting by the end is the best way to do it. So the key is that developing processes which would embed then in the company is important, but understanding how this process tackles scope 1, 2, and 3 altogether is a very important point.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sebastian. And I've had a bit of a cue just to explain what scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions are. Very quickly, scope 1 are your direct emissions owned and controlled within your own organization. Scope 2 are your indirect emissions from the generation of purchased energy, for example. And scope 3 are your emissions from your value chain, your transportation, your logistics, and some of the activities that Richard was touching on. Richard, very quickly, one final question for you. In one line, what guidance would you give businesses in your industry? Where would you advise them to focus?
I would advise them to make a plan. Make a plan, think about the future, and get involved and start getting their colleagues involved. So I think the panel have already said it's about everybody getting involved and doing something. And the plan may change. It's likely to change. It will develop. It will get better. But make a plan. If they don't have a plan, get one, and then start to do something proactively.
Fantastic. I'm just conscious of time, so I think we will move to perhaps some Q&As. But before we do that, I do have two very, very brief questions for Joe and Simon. Simon, I think you've touched very briefly on your sports career, because I would love to hear a little bit more about what sustainability means for some of the sports people that you've come in contact with. Is it important for sports?
I think you only have to look at how many sports men and women were at COP26 to realise that it's very important to most sports people. I think there's some obvious linkages that have come out of what we do as sports people. There's a lot of sailors and rowers and people who live on the sea or in rivers that see the pollution and see the issues, right in front of them, so that there's an obvious reason why they would be invested in it. But I think, just as a general rule, as you know, younger, because it's sports is outside a few disciplines is a young person's sport, and obviously younger generations as they come through are certainly a lot more environmentally conscious than you know previous generations were. So I think the two go hand in hand, and if you do manage to achieve a status in sport, you generally have a voice, and I think a lot more athletes are using that voice for the greater good, and that can only be a positive thing, you know, to my mind. So
fantastic, thank you. And Joe, perhaps slightly a little bit different. You touched on this briefly. Your career with the WWF and in Hong Kong. China's becoming a really big topic for all things emissions reductions and achieving our global targets. Very briefly, what did you see as you were working there, and how did you and what did you work on, whether that was in Hong Kong or whether that was with the WWF? What was the culture like? Just interested and curious, because I know there were some people that said I should ask you that question.
Right. Well, I did leave Hong Kong 20 years ago, so actually more than 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So I can only talk about, you know, how it was when I was living and working there. I think what I found the most interesting, and it's something that I've carried forward throughout my career, is the fact that I thought that the people didn't care about the environment. And for example, very few people who go to Hong Kong understand that there are two resident species of cetaceans there. There's a pink dolphin and there are finless porpoises. And I used to see the pink dolphins all the time. If I was out sailing, I knew exactly where to find them. But giving talks to local biology teachers, they were going, but we don't have dolphins here. And at that time, they were building the new airport. It was the biggest engineering project on the whole planet, and it was right in the dolphin nursery ground. And I was getting so cross that they hadn't even considered an environmental impact assessment, and this is where we were always seeing the dolphins. But then I realized people just didn't know. And if you don't know about something, how can you possibly care? So a lot of the work I was doing was raising awareness. And once people did know, they couldn't do enough. The pink dolphin ended up being the emblem of the handover, the mugs and the little souvenirs that were being sold. It was all about it. And it just made me realize people have to know about something before they want to protect it. And it was a huge issue because nothing was protected below the high water mark. Hong Kong has more species of coral than the whole of the Caribbean. And again, the local biology teachers didn't know there were corals in the water. So that then became a huge thing. Any development that was happening had to have these full environmental impact assessments, and people couldn't do enough. So I think before you point fingers at people for not caring, we have to give them a chance to understand what the problem is. And that, in our work in ocean conservation, so many people don't realize how much we depend on the ocean just to live. Every day you're breathing in oxygen that comes from the ocean, and it's busy absorbing the CO2 we produce. And once you understand that, then you can think differently. You can choose not to care, but most people will. Most people are good and want to do the right thing. And that, I think, is what I've carried forward from my work there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Just quickly interrupt on that, because I think it's a really, really interesting point, and I think it's got massive value. I've got 4 teenage kids, and in this tech world that we are now living, they want the next iPhone as soon as it's out, and they're very kind of, they're not bothered about what happens with the old and all this sort of stuff, but yet they're environmentally conscious, and I'm trying to get them to reduce their time on their phones and their dependability on their phones, even though I see them as a very valuable resource. But no matter how many times I tell them, get off your iPhones, get off your screens, I can't get them to do so. And it wasn't until actually this week on holiday when my eldest daughter said, do you realize that the impact of stored emails and the impact of when we're scrolling through on Instagram, what impact that has on the environment. And I was like, yeah, I do. Yeah, of course I do. I've been told I was up at COP26, and I explained that to you at the time, but it's only just got into her consciousness now, and she's limiting her time on her phone. I just think, and it's that education piece, and doesn't, might not necessarily be best delivered from parents, but having that information at hand does, that is really impactful.
Kids can be the most amazing ambassadors too, because of what they're learning in schools. Actually, if I can just give a plug for our website, oceangeneration.org. If anyone does have teachers amongst their friends and families, we have some incredible free resources to download, complete lesson plans with everything they need. And also anything for the younger people in your organisations. We run Wavemakers workshops, which allows them to use their own values and interests and talent to actually find out what they can do specifically that they can bring in, and to interest their colleagues in caring about the environment as well. And I think everyone I'm speaking to on this panel is way ahead of the game on sustainability, but we're doing our best to bring sustainability into all walks of life, so from age 3 upwards.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Tara, I think we'll probably go to Q&As. Anna Sophia, I think we could leave the Q&As with you. You probably have a few questions that you hopefully will have received.
We are awash with questions, and unfortunately I don't think we're going to have time to go through them all. But I'll hit one very quickly first. Somebody's asked, I am working on a sustainability for my organisation. What should I do to drive this agenda?
I could probably start
with that. Yeah,
I could probably start with that, and Joe, I can see your hand is coming up. I'm probably going to take a macro perspective of the organization. I think one of the first things to do is to assess where the organization is, where you are. So things like a materiality assessment will come in handy. That's basically an assessment you do to understand what's important for the organization and for the stakeholders within the organization, and then prioritize what needs to be addressed by working with the various stakeholders and categorizing the activities into key priorities. And then working with very key stakeholders such as your CEO, cough, cough, we've got Tara on the call, working with your key stakeholders, CEOs, to really identify how you drive your materiality assessment, how you develop your strategy, and what you really need to achieve within the next 6 months, within the next 1 year. Joe, did you want to come in there? Mine is a very macro perspective, and I've probably touched on something very, very high level, but any thoughts?
Well, only that if somebody is feeling lost or wanting to encourage others to do something, I would say sign up to the Wavemaker workshops. Although they're aimed at the under 25s, we've had people in their 60s sign up and get so much from them. And also we learn so much from them as well, because we're all learning all the time. But it just makes you think outside the box, and it's incredible what you can achieve, particularly in these when people are working together and coming up with ideas. And it's all about bringing this into your working life. That's what they're geared towards. So if you go to oceangeneration.org and then sign up to Wavemakers.
I really love that, Joe. I was just going to say,
Simon, you had to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, going back to Tara's point about, don't forget to ask your employees, make it employee led, and you'll get a lot more buy-in.
Yeah.
Completely agree. I was just going to say, Joe and probably Simon have touched on this. I think learning and development is another really key part, and bringing stakeholders along on that journey with you. I think we have so many answers for everybody, or no, just on that one question. Sebastian, you wanted to come in.
just about the little thing. I think it's all about, from all what we said, it's all about people understanding what sustainability means. And the problem I've got is a bit exactly what we had early on. We talk about scope 3. For most of people, it doesn't mean anything. Or it's a bit like when you got a program on TV telling you about the millions of cubic meters of CO2, which is again meaningless to anybody going to put a kettle on. And I think this is where the issue is. The point is to understand that the sustainability, we said it many times, it is feasible not just by the large industry that would change what they do, but also by the industry, but also by each individual. We all have a role to play. And the other thing I want to add is that I hope that all what we said is not too negative, because one of the good things I've picked up from the COP26, for example, there was a lot of information which was really, really terrifying. But on the other hand, things are happening. I think the fact that people don't realize that before the COP26, there were 25 others that sort of have been ignored. It's a sign. I mean, the timing is really there. People want to do something. Innovation is there. The will is there from the big guys, from the individual. It is there. But it's about understanding. And we, first, all of us, we need maybe to be careful when we use some terminology about the scope is a good example. We need to define exactly what it is. Sustainability, scope, circular economy. It's exactly that, to see that things can be done at all levels. It can be from large industry changing, burning things, but planting trees, using the kettle letting, all those kind of detail. There's many of them. And I think that's what Joe is alluding to, those sort of workshops. You can find information. We need to make people willing to find information and then provide it in a way that they'll be happy to do so, and understanding how things can be done. Information, yeah.
What's interesting, I think, is one of the comments that you made earlier, Joe. Somebody's commented sustainable futures should be part of a national curriculum in schools that gives a voice to the youngsters. So I think it's definitely resonating there. If I can just jump to one of the somebody commented previously, it's like Simon's in my head. So it's definitely I've lost the comment. Bear with me 1 second. I'm just trying to find it. It's like Simon's in my head. My old laptops live under my bed, and I never know what to do with them. So you've definitely hit the nail on the head there too, Simon. We had a number of people asking, are there any companies that you can recommend to us that we can send our phones or laptops to? What have you? As individuals, I guess, as well as organisations. Okay.
Excellent. So I suppose we probably come to the end of our session now, but I noticed that we have tens of hundreds of questions, so perhaps what we'll do is try and make some sense of them offline, ask the panel to do a little bit of work for us to get back to people. We'll publish some stuff through social media, etc., with some answers to your questions. That's probably the best way that we can tackle them, because I think there's probably more questions than time, to be honest with you. And I'm conscious of the fact that everybody's probably got to get on with their Earth days. So I just sort of wrap up by just letting you know how grateful I am to the panel for coming along and being so inspiring. You know, I think Joe, absolutely right. We should stay positive. Sebastian, absolutely right. We need to all take part in challenging the circular economy and understanding it a little bit better and being creative. So I'm taking that. Simon, absolutely right. Someone with laptops under the bed and phones in the drawer. So corporately, I'm going to go and have a ponder on what we can do as CGI to maybe all have a bit of an amnesty ourselves. But what I took away from it, and Richard's not here, who's obviously doing fabulous work with the farms and thinking about how we can improve milk production and broader production whilst also offering fantastic services to us all. So I think we're very blessed, Matty, I'd say, to have such a fantastic panel. And, you know, if we do anything today on Earth Day, then maybe we should just do a little thing each ourselves, because, you know, throwing pebbles in the pond is worth us doing something personally as well as waiting for somebody else to do something. And I know some of the comments were it's not enough, etc., but you do have to start somewhere, don't you? So we should all maybe today of all days think of doing a thing, be it not using the hairdryer, using our phones less, getting rid of some of those emails that we've all got, thinking about how we can get rid of some of the old tech we've got in our drawers, etc. And I'm sure there's a million other excellent ideas, but very inspiring. So thank you, panel, so much for taking the time to spend this time with us this morning. We really, really appreciate it. Matty, thank you for organising it. We're blessed to have you at CGI.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.